to episode 3 of Fanfiction Haven. I'm your host, Opal the Dragoness, and if you're wondering why my voice sounds a little bit different compared to the previous 2 episodes, that is because I decided to not record on my phone this time. I have a good microphone from all the years that I was a YouTuber before, so I brought it out here to the garage, I borrowed a laptop, and I'm just recording on Audacity. Unfortunately, I have to use Windows, but that's okay. I can deal with that for, half an hour. It's no big deal. So for today's episode, I'm going to be talking about one of my, I think, top 5 or 6 stories. I'm not sure if it's the number 5 place or number 6 place. It fluctuates sometimes, but Familial Ragnarok. That's what we're talking about today. And this lightly touches on some more serious topics, so you have been warned. But, a lot of my stories deal with serious topics. Just like with the previous story that I talked about last time, Welcome to Omi, this story also has to do with a divergence during the movie Thor Ragnarok. So it starts with the scene of Odin on the cliff, and he's about to die. But I decided that instead of him just, popping off, going into some sparkles and saying, see ya, he does a little something worse than just mentioning Hela, or Hela, or, yeah, it's Hela. I don't know why I keep saying Hela. I think I've heard way too many robot voices call it Hela and then mispronounce it, and it really annoys me, and then it got stuck in my brain. And so now it's like, it's Hela, because, hell, because, goddess of death. Got it. Anyway, so forget her. She doesn't even exist in this timeline. I mean, she does technically exist, but not in the way that the MCU portrayed her. I portrayed her a little bit closer to Norse mythology. This is one of several stories I have in my roster where I blend MCU with actual Norse mythology just a little bit more accurately, though I did take some very serious creative liberties with this one, I gotta tell you. So, everybody loves my portrayal of a certain character. Everyone thinks he's a sweetie, so I'll get to him in a minute. So instead of Odin saying that Ragnarok is coming because of Hela, he's going to say that it's coming because of Loki's children. Loki doesn't remember having children because Odin cast a suppression/memory wiping dampening spell on the entirety of the 9 realms, so nobody remembers a whole bunch of stuff, which is why I was able to incorporate things like Fenrir and Jormungand and Hela and my favorite special baby, Sleipnir. Oh boy, he's so special. Anyway, so obviously this comes as a shock to them, and they go, and Odin dies or whatever, and he gives them this book that kind of is like the old poetic Eddas, and he says that not all of it is just something made up by human mortals. And some of it is true, and some of it's not true. And so they're kind of poring over this book, trying to figure out, well, how much of this is actually true? Well, we know that this isn't true, and we know that that isn't true. Like, Loki isn't married to Sigyn, because Sigyn doesn't even exist in this timeline. And Thor in the book was supposed to be married to Sif, and he's not obviously married to Sif, which, by the way, that comes up a little bit later with a little misunderstanding, because she overhears them talking about how Thor was supposed to be married to Sif, and then she interpreted that he was going to ask her to marry him, and it's like this whole political marriage, and there was this whole thing. But anyway, that happens a little after. Getting to the part that I really wanted to talk about, which was Sleipnir. So Loki has flashes of memories where he was kind of forced into a situation where he had to have, a baby. And that baby happened to be an 8-legged horse, which, by the way, if you watch the first Thor movie, you actually see, just briefly, you get to see Sleipnir. Odin is riding him when he's in Jotunheim, and he's, kind of getting Thor in trouble for starting a war with the Frost Giants. You blink and you'll miss it kind of situation. But Sleipnir is in the MCU. He's just not technically acknowledged as Loki's son, but I definitely include that in this story. Don't mind me. It is so hot. I swear, it is hotter today than it was the day before yesterday. And I must be like 33 or 34 out. It is, whew, and I'm in a hot garage, you know. I'm recording in my garage because I don't want anyone to interrupt me when I'm recording. So I'm in the garage. But anyway, you know, just as a side tangent, someone made a very interesting comment on one of my videos last night. I couldn't sleep. It was like 1 in the morning. And someone said, hey, I don't really read stories, but could you read it? And they were basically asking me to do like an audio version of my stories. And I think that could be fun, but then I would have to voice act. And I haven't tried to do any voice acting in a very, very long time. But, you know, if that's something you guys would be interested in, of me just reading one of my stories, I'm open to it. You know, let me know down in the comments. Do you want me to read one of my stories, or all of them, or some of them? I don't know. I might do it. I might do it. Anyway, well, I'm going to try to calm myself down, because I've been very excitable for the past few minutes starting this podcast, but I'm going to calm things down a little bit, and I'm going to talk a little softer. I'm going to talk about the scene where Loki confronts Sleipnir. So Odin just died, they just got back to Asgard, and then they go and they see in the throne room and the courtyard and all that, Sleipnir is freaking out because all of a sudden he has his memories back, and he remembers who and what he was supposed to be, because he was suppressed for centuries to be Odin's steed, but he doesn't remember until now of the fact that he has a mind that works, and that he's sentient, and that he has feelings and thoughts and ambitions and hopes and dreams of his own, and that he's been suppressed all this time. So he's running around, and the guards are like, maybe we should put him down, he's gone mad, you know, and Loki's the one who stops them. And Loki takes off the armor, he takes off the saddle and the girdle and all that. He takes off, or bridle, I mean, and he takes all of it off, and he sends Sleipnir on his way, and he says, it's over, you can go. And basically he sets him free, but it's like this really touching moment, the way that I wrote it. And everyone's kind of confused, and Thor's mad. It's like, well, that was father's horse, why would you do that? And then they talk about how there's a possibility, because Loki's memory is fuzzy, and he's only getting flashes of memory so far, and so is Thor. He vaguely kind of recalls the idea that maybe this horse is his son. And so they go away, and then Thor has to make this big speech, and he talks about how Odin is dead, and I almost forgot to mention, I included Balder in there. So Balder is supposed to be the firstborn in this situation, and so Thor decides, well, I don't want to be king, and I certainly can't let Loki be king, so we're going to track down Balder, and we're going to make him king. Yeah, that's going to backfire real badly. If any of you mythology nerds know where this is going, you know where this is going. Oh boy, do you ever. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with Norse mythology, basically Loki in the myths, he is the instigator of Ragnarok, and he ends up kind of tricking Balder's blind brother to shoot him with mistletoe, which is the only thing that Balder is not immune to, because Frigg, which was Balder's mother, made every plant and creature and whatever promise not to hurt him, but she overlooked the mistletoe because it was young. And then Loki kind of got jealous of the fact that, you know, Balder was the golden, you know, god of light, god of, you know, I don't know, making peace and stuff like that. And he was special or whatever, and a pacifist. And then, you know, Balder dies. Thor, in the mythology, gets really mad. And then Loki is kicked out of Asgard, and he's bound to a rock, and his children are torn to pieces, and he's wrapped in their entrails, and the venom of a snake is dripping on his forehead, and Sigyn is collecting it in a bowl, and, you know, there's this whole thing. And then, you know, Ragnarok happens because Fenrir gets out and eats Odin, and it's a whole thing. Anyway, so that's the myth, which was in the book that Loki and Thor MCU took a look at, and they were like, wow, that's ridiculous. That's not even, half of this stuff isn't even true. But some of it is. And so there's an overlap, and some of it is real and some of it is not real, and they can't differentiate between what really, is true and is not true. So going back around to Sleipnir and Balder, so Odin told Loki that his children are going to be the cause of Ragnarok, so Loki has to go around and find all of his children, try to prevent Ragnarok, and then, Thor wants to go and find Balder, but then Thor knows in the back of his mind that it's prophesied that Loki's going to kill Balder, and Thor literally turns to Loki and says, "Can you not?" And Loki's like, "I don't know, why would I haven't even met the guy, why would I kill him? I don't even know, So kind of that attitude. I'm not being a little more casual with it, but you get the idea. There was a moment that was a lot more serious where Loki kind of, in the myths, I think it's either Angerboda or Angerbida, I'm not sure the proper pronunciation. She was a frost giant that Loki slept with, and she's the one who gave birth to Fenrir and Hel and Jormungand. But Sleipnir was a special case where Loki turned into a mare and slept with a horse to stop a giant from building the wall of Asgard or something like that. I'm trying to remember. But basically, I twisted the myth with Angerboda a little bit differently, so that a much younger Loki was kind of forced and kidnapped to be with her and then have those monstrous children. And in the myth, he was kind of forced to be with Sleipnir's father, Svartalfari. And so I took that concept of, violation and being forced to have children against his will, and I took that a lot more seriously. And so Loki kind of is having these flashes of trauma and remembering, but not fully remembering. And Thor is vaguely remembering flashes of rescuing a much younger Loki from, what happened to him. And so when he finally does end up remembering Sleipnir in a later scene, it's a much bigger deal. So Thor, and that brings me to the point that I wanted to, which is that Thor kind of ousted the fact that Loki has children, and it was kind of against his will, and then that really humiliated Loki. So Loki gets mad, and he goes into the fields to just kind of clear his head and think, and he lays down in the field, and Thor is dealing with the aftermath of everyone finding out that Odin is dead. And then Sleipnir comes back, and he's kind of looking at Loki, like with this curiosity, and Loki makes this little joke about, coming to trample him and put him out of his misery and come to kill him or something like that. And instead of killing him, Sleipnir lays down, and he kind of puts his big head on Loki's chest or whatever, kind of pins him a little bit, and they bond. And then Loki starts kind of just talking to the horse because he figures, well, maybe you understand me, maybe you don't. And he starts complaining about what Thor did, and he gets this feeling like maybe Sleipnir, maybe he understands, Maybe there's more to him. Maybe his mind is more than that of a horse. So Loki decides on a whim, and he kind of asks for permission, but kind of doesn't, and he transforms Sleipnir into what could be referred to as an Aesir form, so looking like kind of humanoid, like a god kind of thing, but not just any random shape. He kind of draws out what he would have looked like if he hadn't been born a horse. It's a very specific kind of Sierra magic kind of stuff. And the first thing that Sleipnir does is he turns to Loki and he goes, "Mother!" and then he embraces him, and then Loki is just like, "Is that really what you want to call me?" And then there's this whole thing. And Sleipnir, he's such a sweet little being. He talks about his own ambitions. He has a much more sunny disposition. It's like, yeah, I was forced to be the steed, but, I lived a great life according to a horse. Wild horses, they live terrible lives, and, I was taken care of, and all that kind of stuff. And he has this kind of philosophical discussion with Loki. And Loki doesn't understand how positive, Sleipnir, why he's so positive. But, he kind of accepts it. And then they decide to go back to the dining hall, and, And then there's this whole scene where Loki confronts Thor, and then Sleipnir confronts the room, and then Sleipnir kind of lets slip about, his origins, and then everyone makes fun of Loki, and then makes fun of Sleipnir, and then Sleipnir runs away, because he was under the impression that Loki was a horse pretending to be a god, not a god pretending to be a horse. So his idea of his mother, yeah, that was a really brutal confrontation that he had to go through. And eventually, Loki remembers. He remembers the whole thing. And there's this moment where they embrace. And, and eventually, more stuff happens and they get to meet Boulder and all that stuff. But if you want to know more about this story, you're going to have to read it yourself. Because I'm talking about this for about 15 minutes. And it's nice to be able to just talk about my stories. And if you've been enjoying this, check out my other episodes if you haven't already. Episodes 1 and 2. Episode 1 is just me introducing myself. Episode 2 is me talking about Welcome to Omi and also some other stuff that I had to deal with. Today's episode is going to be a little bit shorter, just because it is so hot in this garage. I am sweating. I am dying, and if I don't get out of here soon, I'm going to pass out. But thank you for watching, for listening, and I really appreciate you just taking the time to hang out. Please check out my AO3, read my stories, pick one. I'm sure there's at least one that you'll like if you like listening to this podcast. Or not, just wait for the next episode where I talk about the next story. And as far as me actually reading my stories out loud, I'm seriously considering it. I wouldn't mind. It would be a little less chaotic. It'd be more structured. I'd do proper narration, proper voice acting, proper, well, maybe not like super proper, but as good as I can get. I'll make a real effort. But I'm still going to do maybe a few more episodes first, gauge how I feel, because I have so many things that I want to talk about with regards to my stories, all that kind of stuff. But I'm gonna be dead soon. Anyway, links in the description for my AO3. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. And what are you guys working on? I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye now.